6 months, and they're only doing it because of the conniption we're having over the Epstein stuff. If we, the people, didn't speak up, nothing was going to happen. Now I see people, oh, there's a plan, it's 5D chess. No, it isn't 5D chess. What's happening is what happens when we, the people, speak up. I saw it during COVID. Nothing was happening until we, the people, rose up. Then it changed. Same thing here. What's happening is people stood up and said, hell no.
To August of last year, nobody really knew who I was.
There's about 12 people who are producing 65% of anti-vaccine misinformation.
We need to come together as Americans and realize that we have a war at hand here. Right?
Like, dude, how scared of this shit do you have to be to be wearing gloves, a face shield, a mask at this point?
Help us to urge folks and say to them, look, it's time to roll up your sleeve and get the shot.
Chiropractor in Omaha, Nebraska, responsible for 65% of the anti-vaccine misinformation. Put what I say to the test. Just don't write me off as crazy misinformation.
Doctor, please bring yourself in order.
600,000 people will die of cancer. 300,000 people will die of obesity this year. When is enough enough?
All right. Well, I'm sitting down with a friend of mine, a guy that I've been standing in the gap with ever since COVID baloney, Corona baloney has hit our nation and the world. But Attorney Tom Renz, I'm just very thankful to be sitting down with you and having a conversation. How are you, my friend?
I'm doing great, Ben. I'm glad to be here. It's been a while, and I got to tell you, you've been a warrior. You've stood strong. You've taken abuse. You've taken arrows. Man, you have fought. So, I'm glad to be here with you and glad to catch up.
Yes. Well, I know you've taken on the medical establishment and the medical tyranny as well, and you've been a brother from another mother, and you have the same convictions that I have. So I'm very thankful for people like you. And obviously, this is what it takes. It takes men of courage to band together to really stand in the gap, to fight the good fight, understanding the world that we're in and the war we're in is not just a physical, but it's spiritual and it's ideological and it's psychological. And you even said to yourself, I've heard you say that, this whole COVID thing and the way we handled this was one of the greatest acts, crimes against humanity, and so I just want to talk to you about, when you first realized that this was, that this wasn't just, a pandemic, but it was an act of war. When did you wake up to this whole nonsense?
So going back to January of 2020, I was working on a master's in health, and for no apparent reason, I just decided to get another master's. I was doing the lawyer thing, and I was taking your biostats courses and your epidemiology courses and your evidence-based practices courses, and we get this disease that's popping up in the news, right? And it's a disease, it's rare. I mean, you don't have a whole lot of super interesting things happening in the public health world. So, I start looking at it. And it was interesting to me because I'm looking at it. I'm like, okay, well, I need evidence on it, right? What do we got? Well, it's new, so we don't have much. What do we know? And I would look, and I would see what they had, right? So we've got, this coming out of China. We got this, what was the cruise ship, where everybody was trapped on the cruise ship? If you recall that.
Yes, I do. I don't know the name, but I remember, yes. Yeah,
early on in the pandemic, there was a cruise ship. COVID broke out. They kept everybody on there. And it was like a nice little case study on what happens. And you're just looking, and across the board, you're seeing what's happening. And I'm looking at the statistics. And I'm looking at hard numbers, and I'm looking at things that are measurable, quantitative, right? And then I'm comparing it with what they're saying in the media. Now, as a lawyer, I got a BS detector, right, for lack of a better term, right? And I'm looking at this stuff, and it's just not adding up, right? So, the media, one of the things that they were doing a lot of that really stuck out to me, especially early on, is they were extrapolating numbers on case fatality rates, right? And they were doing it in a way that was very disingenuous. So you get, the early projections, and some of them, on the high end, the projections were going to as high as a 4% case fatality rate. Most responsible people knew that it wasn't going to be anywhere near that. And, you had Johnny Anitas, who's the top epidemiologist on the planet out of Stanford, came out in the summer of 2020 and said, it's going to end up at about 0.2, 0.25, which he was dead right on. But instead of talking about, those numbers, 4% isn't all that scary of a number, especially when you look at the original SARS or the original MERS, which were, I think, 9 and 13 or 15% case fatality rate, so much, much, much higher. Nobody cared about any of that stuff, right? Nobody locks down the world because of TB, which is a 10% case fatality rate. Nobody locks down the world because of any of this stuff. So when they talk about it in the news, they quit talking about those numbers. And what they started doing is saying, well, if 4%, and then they would say, well, what's the global population? Or what's the population of the United States? So if we got 300 million people in the United States, 4%, well, that's 4 million times 3, that's 12 million people are going to die, right? And so they would say it that way instead of saying 4%. And that number doesn't translate, right? So it doesn't, a 4% case fatality rate doesn't translate into 12 million people dying because not everybody's going to get it. And those numbers are never going to be accurate.
100%.
And so early on, the BS detector started going off. And so that made me dig further. And as I dug further, I found more BS. And that it was this kind of consistent, ongoing thing, right? Where over and over again, I would look at what those guys, Fauci, Birx, all the different states, what they were saying, and it just didn't mesh with the numbers. It didn't mesh with the science. It didn't mesh with what they were doing. And the thing that I kept coming back to is if I, as an abject amateur, someone working on a master's degree with a law background, if I could spot that, and it was, and I was correct, how is it that someone, is as smart as, these professionals are supposed to be are missing it? So I knew they were lying. And, that just motivated me to dig further.
Right. And I love that you said, as a lawyer, you have a BS detector. I mean, I think the people that, a lot of the attorneys and a lot of even the people in the healthcare field, they were duped into this whole thing. But it just goes to show you the power of the media. I mean, it's, I love your post, the truth is like a dog whistle. It's like those that, they can hear it really, how do you say it? What was the post? I forget, but it was something along those lines. Those, yeah. I'm going to look it up. It's such a good little quote, but it's so interesting because the truth is like a dog whistle. Only certain people can hear it. Yeah. And I think it's a reality. The Bible even says truth is a narrow path. We are in a time right now where this is ideological, spiritual warfare. And, I just don't want to just talk about COVID and crony baloney, but I just want to talk about the days ahead and just really what we're up against. I mean, as you know full well, this isn't a vaccine. This is gene editing. They're playing God with this vaccine. They're playing God with our genes. I do think that there is a transhumanism agenda coming our way, but they're also coming after our food. If they can't get us to take the injection, they're going to modify our food. And you've already seen this. I saw this back in 20 years ago. I remember that they're like, oh, we can turn a banana into a vaccine. Yeah. And then you have people like Bill Gates that wants to modify these mosquitoes to turn these little mosquitoes into little vaccinators. And it's like, man, it's comical to me because people are like, oh, you're not an epidemiologist and, you have no business speaking on the matter. I'm like, well, you're listening to Bill Gates. He's a computer nerd. Why do we trust that dude with our health? And why do we roll up our sleeves?
Right? Well, this is the problem, right? So we're trusting this psychopath who's got, made more money off of this stuff than we will ever know probably. His dad was was involved with Planned Parenthood. I mean, it's just, there's nothing about this guy that screams, I want to keep people healthy and safe and, have a positive future. So why Bill Gates is even referenced as someone who's credible in this is beyond me. I mean, there's nothing about him that strikes me as credible on any of this. Yeah. Meanwhile, you got guys like you and I who are looking this up. And listen, I don't have to be an epidemiologist to show you, hey, the case fatality rate on this ends up being about like the yearly flu. Hey, John Ioannidis, the top epidemiologist on the planet, knew that that's what it was going to be in the summer of 2020. How comes the rest of you didn't? Hey, COVID is being overdiagnosed with PCR tests ran at too high of cycles. How did I know this? Not because I'm a scientist, but because you can literally read the instruction manual. I mean, yeah, none of the stuff that I pulled out was all that magical. I literally read their stuff and then reported it. And then I was viral all over the place over and over and over again because I was reporting the truth, but it was there. It wasn't like I was, making this up. It wasn't because I was a scientist. But here's the thing. I never tried to be a scientist. I was a lawyer. All I had to do was read their stuff, understand it, and say, hey, you're talking out both sides of your mouth.
Right.
And that's what happened the whole time.
Exactly right. And that's the thing. Going back to what you said something very subtle but also profound, that Bill Gates, his dad was a founding member or something with Planned Parenthood, with Margaret Sanger, who is a known eugenicist. She wanted to eliminate certain populations, believed that we were overpopulated, or the world was overpopulated. Bill Gates believes that. So why on God's green earth? And this is the thing. It's an IQ test at this point. It is literally an IQ test. If people are still rolling up their sleeves and taking these vaccines and believe in the narrative, I'm sorry. This is, you probably don't have the highest of IQs. And I hate to say that, but really this is, it is spiritual and ideological warfare. Again, the minds of the people, people are being duped into this. So I'm so thankful I have the eyes to see and the ears to hear and understand, to see through this BS. And I'm sure you feel the same, Tom. And what are we up against from your point of view when it comes to the powers that be here? I know God wins in the end. I mean, God is for us. Who could ever be against us? But right now, in your view and your experience, just from a legal standpoint, what are we up against, and how do we combat this?
Well, the problem is we're up against basically infinite funds and the people who have the power that infinite funds buy. And we still are up against that. We've been up against that from the beginning. Now, there's a reality that when those people push it too far, we, the people, all of us, rise up. And that's what happened. That's what we leverage to end the lockdowns. It's what we leverage to end the mandates and to end all these different things, right? So, yeah, I did what I did in the courts. I did what I did in the legislature, and I did what I did in all these different places. But at the end of the day, the reason that was powerful and that was able to be done was because we, the people, demanded it. And that was always part of my strategy. Right? I mean, why am I going on podcasts? Why am I out speaking? Why do I do my own show? Why do I do it to this day? Because at the end of the day, if we, the people, don't back an initiative, it's going to be whoever's got the money to buy off the people in charge. Right? That's right. So we're seeing that to this day, and it hasn't changed. Right? So when there's enough people upset, things change. Let's look at the Epstein list right now. Right? And, I support Trump. I don't like his stance on mRNA, but I generally love the president. Epstein list.
Right.
He wants to hide this. Everybody on the planet can see this is BS. There were enough people that fought back and have fought back hard enough that now at least he's, going to give a partial release of whatever it is that he's going to partially release.
Tom, what about the whole circus with them coming out with the Epstein files?
Oh, Jesus. Yeah, this whole thing, this is one of the biggest PR debacles I've ever seen in history. I got to be honest with you. I'm not sure. I don't know whether Pam Bondi is intentionally trying to undermine the president or she's just that bad at what she does. But this has been so mishandled that it's hard to imagine that this wasn't intentional. I mean, how do you think that the mega base is going to be okay with looking the other way as the elites get away with child rape? That's never going to work.
It is backfiring on Trump. I've seen some of his most avid followers turn their backs on him because of the Epstein list. And I think rightfully so. Trump is not our savior. But again, we need to be putting pressure on this because I think the Epstein thing is so much bigger than people realize. If they understood how big this whole thing is, their heads would explode, and the people involved. And so it really, I think it has the potential to uproot our whole government because a lot of these government entities and people are in it. Look at I'm not sure if you remember with the Franklin scandal here in Omaha, Nebraska. but it was a massive, massive ordeal. These children were coming out saying that these people were assaulting them through the Boys Town here in Nebraska, and they were saying so and so. These people were very, very powerful people, even up to the White House at the time. And this was during the 80s, and it was like this underground system in the Boys Town, and these children were whistleblowing it. And the Omaha Herald here, the newspaper, put out articles saying, "Oh, those kids were making it up; they're lying." Well, guess what? One of the head people from the Omaha World Herald was actually named in from these children, and so they're trying to prop these kids up as lying, and they're just and really you're seeing these same patterns in this Epstein case. But if you even research the Franklin scandal, to this day, the Wikipedia says that it was a conspiracy. These kids were making it up. They were all lying. And now you're seeing that same pattern today with Trump and the Epstein. It's like, are you kidding me? This is Jeffrey Epstein didn't kill himself. And it's like, because there was no clients, they killed him because they're protecting, their reputation. They're trying to protect this whole industry. And if people knew the truth, I think it would be there would be revolution overnight.
Well, I don't think there's any question about that. Listen, at the end of the day, we have 3 decades of evidence on Jeffrey Epstein. I mean, he came out and kind of came on the scene in the 90s. I mean, from Clinton on forward, everybody has known about what Epstein is and what he does. And trying to suggest to us that that's not real is absurd. Trying to suggest, listen, you know what I think happened? I think that some of the evidence was whitewashed under the Biden administration. But you remember when Bondi says we're going to get all the evidence and we're going to do this and we're going to do this, and she calls up SDNY FBI office, right? The Southern District of New York FBI office, says, I want all your Epstein stuff. And remember, she couldn't get it for like 2 weeks. Well, what the hell do you think they were doing during that time?
Right.
I mean,
very suspect.
Here's the question. This was a big deal. Why is it day one she didn't go up there and get the damn stuff herself?
Right.
I mean, this is ineptitude on a profound level. And further, we're 6 months into her tenure. What has she done?
Right.
Is one major Democrat, one major leftist, what has she done? We saw a Gateway Pundit story earlier this week where the FBI says they're now opening investigations into Democrats on certain things. Just now. 6 months, and they're only doing it because of the conniption we're having over the Epstein stuff. If we, the people, didn't speak up, nothing was going to happen. Now I see people, there's a plan, it's 5D chess. No, it isn't 5D chess. What's happening is what happens when we, the people, speak up. I saw it during COVID. Nothing was happening until we, the people, rose up. Then it changed. Same thing here. What's happening is people stood up and said, hell no. Listen, you can't disavow us because we don't like child rapists. You know what, Trump? You don't like us as supporters because we don't believe in child rape? Then so what? But here's the deal. A lot of people don't understand this. I can support Donald Trump on some issues and not on others, right? So I didn't hire Trump to be Jesus for me. I'm not in a cult. And anybody if you want to be in a cult, you go ahead and be in a cult. I'm not. What I look at is, did I generally like Donald Trump? Yes. Did I generally support his positions? Absolutely. Did I vote for him? Yes. Did I fight for him to get elected? I, out of my pocket, ran all over the damn country trying to get him elected. Right. So you want to tell me I'm not MAGA? I got news for you. You show me what you did compared to what I did.
100%.
But I'm not a cultist.
Right.
And I recognize that he may be wrong on certain issues. He's wrong on Epstein. He's wrong on mRNA. He's wrong on Palantir having total surveillance and instigating AI into our government. And he's wrong on some of the AI in general. I love a lot of what he does. I love a lot of his foreign policy, not all of it. I didn't like a couple things. I like his economic policy. I like what he's doing on a lot of social policy. I like a ton of things Donald Trump is doing. I think he's a great president. I think he'll go down as one of the best in many ways, but not on mRNA and not on this Epstein thing as a debacle unless he turns it around and starts putting people in jail. If he starts, if it turns out that they can show that Bill Clinton and Bill Gates were riding that Lolita Express and doing things they shouldn't have been, if he puts those two in jail, he will be a legend for all times.
Right.
But the real question is, because MAGA wants accountability.
Right. And whatever happened to Ghislaine Maxwell? I mean, you know what I mean? She was arrested, and where is she? I think we need to put her on trial. I mean, and I think the American people need to demand that.
Well, she's in jail right now, and she's in jail because she was convicted of trafficking. Well, I thought they just
to who?
Yeah, I thought they just told us that there was a conspiracy theory. How is she in jail then?
Right.
Why was Epstein in jail awaiting trial for trafficking? If there was nothing to see, why was he in jail for it? Why did the attorney at SDNY talk about it? Why have so many people talked about it? The guy was in jail when he was suicided for trafficking.
Right.
Well, trafficking, he can't traffic to himself. Who is he trafficking to? And the question is, if he was trafficking, why aren't we looking at the people he was trafficking to? Because if you were raping children, you belong in jail.
100%. 100%. Well said. And it just breaks my heart, because the establishment is protecting hides over children. Children are suffering. And, and I think this is so satanic and evil. It's just, it just fuels my fire. And we need to be talking about it. We need to be bringing this to the forefront of conversation and putting pressure on our government. We need to be shouting at the rooftops and demand justice, and really just to eradicate this whole system. I mean, because it's an ongoing thing. It's all evil. And again, the people that are in this industry are very powerful people, and some of the arguably the most powerful people on the planet. And I think that it runs deeper than just trafficking. I think it's even ties to the adrenochrome industry. And, that opens a can of worms, and how they harvest that. It's so evil and disgusting. And I think this ties even to Planned Parenthood. I mean, why do they want full-term abortions? Why are they doing this? And why are they so adamant about that, protecting the abortion industry? And it's not just for women's rights and all this stuff. I think there's a bigger story here, even in the vaccine industry. I think, how I think the vaccine industry and the abortion industry are one and the same. Because if you look at all the abortal fetal cell parts, and you look at Stanley Plotkin's deposition, he's admitted that they continuously use abortions for the production, development, and processing of these vaccines. And that, and I've gotten debates with people. So yes, they are protecting this industry, protecting the lies. And again, it's all evil. When it all boils down to it, it's just evil. And it's good versus evil.
Well, Ben, let's look at this. So we just had the Stanford study came out, 709 days, which was the longest that they tested for, post mRNA injection. You still see these super elevated levels of spike protein. Now, what does that mean? Well, if the mRNA worked in any way, shape, or form like they suggested it worked, that wouldn't be possible, right? Because the mRNA goes into your body, trains your body to create the spike protein temporarily. So your body is in theory going to learn how to fight that spike protein. The problem is that's not what actually happens. For your body to still have that elevated of a level of spike protein after 709 days, that suggests that it's still in your body 709 days later, right? And how would that be? Because theoretically, that shouldn't still be the case. That shouldn't still be able to be there unless the reverse transcriptase theory was right, and it is in some cases reintegrating into people's DNA. Now, I'm not a doctor or scientist, but I talked to a few of them, and I know how to read medical journals, and I've looked at this, and I would love to ask any doctor or scientist to explain to me how you see these highly elevated levels of mRNA or a spike in people's blood 709 days later, if it's not integrating into the DNA, if it's not staying there on some permanent basis. Because if it did what they're supposed to, it would have stayed in the muscle for 3 days and then dissipated, and your body'd be trained, right? Because that's what it was supposed to do. None of that's true. Now, further, let me pull these couple little factoids for you. So we had the studies out of Europe showing that there was SV40 contamination in the Pfizer vaccines. Well, SV40 would allow for reverse transcription, right? It would allow for that mRNA to reintegrate into your DNA. Well, here's the real catch, though. The SV40 wasn't the only thing they found. There was another study out of Europe, I'm not sure if you saw this one, Ben, that there was SV40 promoter in the Pfizer vials, at least some of them. Well, now, again, a little out of my pay grade, but I checked on this. SV40, it's possible, it's conceivable that there'd be contamination in the vial because of issues with the way it was processed, the vaccine was made. The promoter, the SV40 promoter, could not be there unless it was intentional. SV40 causes cancer. Why would you put a promoter in a vial with something that causes cancer? Why would you do that? Was it to cause cancer? I don't know. All I know is that you've got SV40 promoter and SV40 in there. SV40 promoter couldn't be there by accident. It can't. It's not possible. So where does that leave us? Well, it leaves us with a lot of questions that ought to be answered that no one in our federal government is even willing to ask.
100%. So for those that aren't listening to this, the SV40, the simian virus, was in the polio vaccine, which has been attributed to how many cancers?
Yep.
Right. So what you're saying is that they found the SV40, but also the SV promoter that SV40 can integrate into our DNA.
Yep.
And that's pretty, and again, this is something that is profound and it should be on all front page news, but you're not seeing that. And again, so this is interesting because I've said since day one, and that you saw in early documents that this vaccine they're trying to do genome therapy. And you look at the DARPA contracts with Pfizer back in 2013. They hired Pfizer. They signed contracts with Pfizer to promote gene editing technologies, genome editing technologies, molecular splicing technologies. And how is that even possible? And and I've said, well, I don't have all the answers, and I'm not a geneticist by any means, but I've studied epigenetics. I've looked into this. I've been in the vaccine realm, but I was like, is this CRISPR-Cas9 technology? Are you familiar with CRISPR-Cas9?
Yeah. I mean, I'm by no means an expert, but yes, I've read extensively.
Yeah. Right. So why do you think they're trying to get after the DNA?
Well, that's the thing we got to ask ourselves, right? I mean, what is the obsession with everything about modifying, controlling our genetics? And there is. I mean, we see DNA vaccines, we see RNA vaccines, we see saRNA, we see these plasmid vaccines, all these different things. It's all about the genetic stuff. It's all about controlling the genetics and this and other. And here's the problem, right? So Ben, my understanding is about 2% of our DNA codes for proteins. We know what it does. It codes for proteins. The other 98% is largely no one knows really what it does. For a long time, they said, well, it doesn't really do anything. We don't know what it does. It's just extra. It's carryover. And, now there's people recognizing it does stuff, but they don't know what. We have no idea how our DNA works. We know about this much about it, and yet we're going to go ahead and screw with it. Right? We're going to mess with this. Now, the other thing that creates a bit of an issue because there's no way we can know what it's going to do. But the second part of that is if we're going to mess with our genetics, how much can you change before you're not human anymore?
That's
right?
Exactly right.
I mean, it's going to change a little bit, generation to generation. You make a baby that's going to be, the environment affects your genetics a little bit. But how much can you screw with before you become non-human?
Right.
And how do we even know that? Maybe you look human, but you can't think like a human. Maybe you see things differently. Maybe you feel differently. What do we do? But we don't know how any of this works. We don't understand it. We don't know how our brain works. So how can we know how our genetics impact our brain? There's so many questions, so many ethical concerns here, but yet we keep screwing with it. Why? And that's the $1 million question. Why are these people so obsessed with messing with something that they don't understand?
That's exactly right, my friend. And I think that's where it goes back to, okay, you have your secular viewpoint, and right, okay, well, they want to saving lives. But really, when you look from a 30,000 sky foot view and understand that this is more spiritual than we realize, Satan's after the DNA. Satan's after the genome.
Yeah.
He is trying to pervert the body. He's trying to pervert God's creation. We are fearfully and wonderfully made. And he is trying to alter that. I mean, we have hamster cell line. We have MDCK, the Medine Darby canine it's a kidney cell line from a Cocker Spaniel. We have the SV40, which is a monkey cell line. We have the horse cell line. We have a chicken embryo cell line. And not only that, we have Walvax2 cell lines, which are water bag abortion cell lines created from China in 2017. They do water bag abortions to keep these babies alive, to harvest the cell lines for all these other vaccines. And to your point, they are injecting this into the body. You have Bill Gates even talking about, we have GMOs and we just shoot it right in the arm, inject it right in the body, and just shoot it right up. What is that doing to our bodies? What is that doing to our bodies from a physiological standpoint? And how is that altering our DNA? And I firmly believe you hit the nail on the head. We're not going to be, how many times can we inject these kind of things and alter our DNA before we're not even recognizably human anymore?
Well, that's it. We don't even know. But, I guess one of the things, on the faith-based side for me, because, we're both Christians here, what could be a greater insult, a greater blasphemy to God than taking man who's created perfectly in his image and modifying it?
Oh,
right?
Dude, right.
I mean, from a Christian standpoint, I just have a real moral issue with this. I think that the whole thing is wrong on every level. And, now does that mean that I've got a problem with every sort of, gene therapy that could ever come down the pipe? No. I mean, listen, I understand if you've got some sort of a, I don't know, ALS or some sort of a genetic, I think ALS is genetic, where you've got some sort of a horrible disease and they can kind of unwind that. I don't think I would have an issue with that. Because, there can be environmental factors, other things that mess with you, and maybe we can find a way to undo some of that. But, the idea of just modifying a person's genetics, for no apparent reason, which is really what this is. Because listen, COVID it was never dangerous. It was never going to be, what was killing people wasn't the COVID, it was the treatments or the lack of treatments. At
100%.
First they wouldn't treat you at all. And then if you got into the hospital, they murdered you. The protocols were murder. There's no other way about that. I've been through this extensively, from using the depressants, so that your breathing goes down, your oxygen goes down, to overpowering the ventilators, to cause lung damage and pneumonia and all sorts of problems, to, ODing on things that, the morphine and the different end-of-life drugs, to I have a remdesivir. The whole 9 yards. We've been through this whole thing. And the hospitals made good money murdering people. So that's what they were doing.
And they're incentivizing death.
Well, yeah.
Financial. And that's the problem. The government subsidized COVID, and we're incentivizing death.
Yeah.
With the outcomes, which is criminal in itself.
Yeah. You made more money if someone got diagnosed with COVID. You made more money if you got them on the vent, more money if you gave them remdesivir, and more money if they died. Every one of those was an extra bonus. And, instead of, hey, we'll pay you extra money if they're healthy, we got the opposite. So it worked out really well if you're Anthony Fauci and you're trying to sell vaccines that people don't need. But, this whole thing was mishandled intentionally. There's no way. These aren't things that you have to be learned to understand. If you start funding people to murder someone, they're going to murder someone. If you start giving people protection, we not only funded them killing people, we offered them legal immunity for doing so. Right. It was absurd.
And they still have that immunity. Look at now the vaccines on the childhood schedule. We have thank God, not thank God, but for them, they're thankful that they have the Vaccine Compensation Act because they have, they're not held liable for injury. Yep. And it's criminal. It is one of those things. But I think you hit the nail on the head. How blasphemous can it be? We were made in God's image, and now you have this secular science that they claim is science, they believe that our body is inherently flawed, deficient, and weak, and we cannot survive unless we have these vaccines, that they're God-given vaccines. And I've gotten in talks with people from my church that said, we got into this vaccine debate, and they said, sin came into the world, and this is why we need vaccines. This is why vaccines are a miracle, and they're putting vaccines on a pedestal like it's a golden calf. I'm like, well, the only savior in the world is Jesus. It has nothing to do with the vaccine, and so it goes back to the point that we are in a spiritual, psychological warfare. But Tom, I remember early on in the pandemic, you talked about data that you had I believe it was in the military, about the COVID vaccine. And I think that was just throughout the years, man, I think that was one of the most profound testimonies you gave. And I saved that video. I have that video in my library. I just want to talk on that, because what you found and just the data collection in the military was profound.
Yeah.
And that was one of the early testimonies given about the adverse reactions in the COVID realm. So can you shine light on that?
Yeah, well, and thanks to Doc Pete Chambers, who's I think he's run for governor now in Texas, Teresa Long, Mark Bashaw, the handful of soldiers that were courageous enough to get that, and all I did was help them get it out. Right? They dug out the data and did great work on it, and then I helped them get it out, and that was my major role in it. And we got it out pretty broadly. I had a seat at Senator Johnson's roundtable, and it was interesting. I think that whole thing was like 6.5 hours, but the 3 to 5 minutes that I spoke ended up being probably the most viral piece of the whole thing. Yeah, because it wasn't. We had some brilliant scientists there. I think McCullough was there, Malone was there, Ryan Cole I think might have been there. I don't remember who all was there, but a lot of brilliant scientists. And but the problem is there was so much talk about the science side. Nobody understands. It's too complicated. Here's what you can understand. You got 1,000% increase in this disease, a 500% increase in that disease. You've got all these different things. It's measurable. Hey, people weren't dying. They got the vax. Now they are dying. Okay, real simple, real straightforward. And the data was indisputable. We took it. I had video of them taking it off the servers. Like it was rock solid evidence. It was indisputable. And then, of course, the military tried to whitewash it afterwards because, they didn't want everybody to know that they're killing their own soldiers, but they were. And, we have all sorts of evidence that they whitewashed it, that sort of thing. But the evidence was profound, and it was very viral globally. And it was truly important. And I'll tell you, actually, Ben, one of the things that the very first major report linking the COVID vaccines to death was one that I actually did probably maybe 6 months or a year before. I might be wrong on the time, but quite a bit before. And I had an HHS whistleblower who had access to Social Security, Medicare, Medicaid databases, who provided me hard evidence I used in court, showed tremendous increases in death and carnage. And we were able to estimate that there had been, I want to say, it was just within the first, few months of the COVID vaccines being out there, we're able to estimate immediately that there were already been at least 45,000 deaths from it. And that was a conservative estimate. They knew from the beginning. And they not only knew, they covered it up because they had the Medicare, Medicaid databases, they had the DMED database, they had all these different things. Plus, they have a bunch of other databases that to this day we haven't been able to see the records on. We know that they have these databases because in October or November of 2020, before the vaccines were even out, at the VRBPAC meeting, they had a discussion, they being the FDA, they had a discussion about how they were going to track the safety efficacy of the vaccines, and they listed the databases they were going to use. Then they proceeded to hide the results of all of these studies, but they had the data. We know they had the data. We also later, I found a project Salus, which was an AI-driven data analysis program, is a joint project between HHS and the Department of Defense, where they were checking and watching and monitoring the safety efficacy of the vaccines. That was covered up and hidden, and it showed I think it was the fall of 2022 when I broke this. It showed Anthony Fauci out there saying, this is a crisis of the unvaxxed. The hospitals are overflowing. Meanwhile, I got the recent report from Project Salus. It was sitting on his desk that said 71% of new cases were in fully vaxxed people, and 60% of new hospitalizations were in fully vaxxed people. Fauci was an outright liar every step of the way, and we proved it over and over again. And I guess some things don't change. If you're a politician, you're a liar.
Right. You're stirring up so much emotion back then, too, just going back down that memory lane. It was comical to me too. The makeshift hospitals, the tents that they put out. Not a single patient was in those tents.
Not one.
Not one. It was just an illusion to give the false deception that this was a big giant scare to scare the people, to coerce people to get the jab, and that it's very obvious, that this was a giant agenda to bring out the vaccine. And so, Tom, I'm very thankful to sit down with you. I think we could talk for hours about this conversation. I think we might have to have a 2.0 with you and just really dive into the continued conversation of the days ahead, because we need Christian men to be bold now more than ever before. We need to have men who are courageous. I mean, God calls us to be bold and courageous. And, and I feel like, I think of the quote of Thomas Jefferson, who stated that, one man with courage is a majority. And, and you look at David on the hill when he was facing Goliath, and he had all the Israelites there complacent, but it was the faith of David, the courage of David, his convictions. And it was because he knew God was behind him and was fighting for him. So I just want to give you the last word here to wrap up this conversation. Just a word of encouragement from you, where people can find you, and I'll give you that last word, Tom.
Well, please support us at TomRenz.com, the Tom Renz Show. We run every day on Rumble and on X, and about 5 days a week. And any support we can get, GiveSendGo.com/RenzLaw. Any support we can get is very much appreciated. If you shop our sponsors on TomRenz.com, you click on the shop, partners and sponsors, it makes a huge impact for us. It really helps us because we're continuing to fight. And I think the last word is really that. We're continuing to fight. The fight is not over. Listen, Ben, they're fast-tracking saRNA. It's going to be a contagious version of the mRNA. It's going to be so much worse. We just approved a new mRNA. Yeah, I understand we love Trump on a lot of fronts, but he's not got this one right. And we've got to help the president to see how badly this is going, how wrong it is. We've got to take a stand. Bobby Kennedy knows, but Bobby Kennedy's hands are pretty tied on this. That's quite clear. We've got to make sure that we fight back on this. We've got to protect our future, our kids' health, our kids' future. Everything's got to be protected. And if we don't fight, if we don't stand, if we don't do what we got to do, we're in serious trouble. We're in serious trouble. So I'm hoping everybody will do everything possible to help us to really, kind of get stuff together, get things moving, and be strong, be courageous. Do not stand down. Do not be comfortable. You got to get out and keep fighting.
Amen. Well said. I mean, Martin Luther King Jr. stated that the ultimate measure of a man is not where he stands in times of comfort and convenience, but where he stands in times of challenge and controversy. Amen. The enemy wants us to be complacent, not to do anything. We have evil and tyranny and a medical dictatorship knocking at our doorstep. If we stay complacent, we are letting them in the door. Tom Renz, I love and appreciate you. Thank you for standing in the gap. Thank you for being one of those men who are unafraid to bend a knee and to cower to an earthly master. So God bless you, Tom. Thank you for our conversation.
God bless you, Ben. Thank you, sir.
to August of last year, nobody really knew who I was.
There's about 12 people who are producing 65% of anti-vaccine misinformation.
We need to come together as Americans and realize that we have a war at hand here. Right?
Like, dude, how scared of this shit do you have to be to be wearing gloves, a face shield, a mask at this point?
Help us to urge folks and say to them, look, it's time to roll up your sleeve and get the shot.
Chiropractor in Omaha, Nebraska, responsible for 65% of the anti-vaccine misinformation. Put what I say to the test. Just don't write me off as crazy misinformation.
Doctor, please bring yourself in order.
600,000 people will die of cancer. 300,000 people will die of obesity this year. When is enough enough?